years at 59.65. The pound buys $1.31 and €1.14. A rescue deal for British Steel has been finalised, saving more than 3,000 jobs. Chinese firm Jingye Group will take over the steelworks at Scunthorpe, Skinninggrove and on Teesside. Edinburgh High Court has started hearing evidence in the trial of Scotland's former First Minister Alex Salmond. The 65-year-old is accused of 14 sexual assaults on 10 women. He denies all the charges against him. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have been at Westminster Abbey for their last official event as senior royals. The Queen and the rest of the royal family have been at a service celebrating the Commonwealth. LBC weather, windy with rain affecting many areas tonight. Very wet for Wales with an amber weather warning in place for central parts. A mild night, particularly across England, a low of 5 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Holly Jones.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. We've just heard the news that there's a fifth UK death from coronavirus. And joining us is Matthew Thompson, LBC senior reporter. Do we know where this fifth death occurred, Matthew?
Yes, Nigel. We know that this was a patient, again, this is becoming quite a common theme, in their 70s, who was very unwell, had a number of significant and long-term health conditions at St Helier Hospital. So again, that fits the pattern of the other 4 people who have died, mostly people who are elderly, mostly people with significant underlying health conditions. But it comes shortly off the back, Nigel, of the Prime Minister giving a press conference alongside the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Advisor, in which he was reiterating the conclusions that we already heard from the COBRA Emergency Committee this morning, that we're not yet moving into the second phase.
Just one moment, Matthew, just to reassure people, St Helier Hospital is actually in Epsom in Surrey, just to be clear. People might have thought it was in Jersey. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, absolutely. And just to say that, the message coming from government at the moment is that we are not yet in the second phase of the response, which they call the delay phase. We're still trying to contain this, but significant plans are having to be made to move us into that second phase. Here's Boris Johnson.
We remain in the contain phase of the outbreak, but watching what is happening around the world, our scientists think containment is extremely unlikely to work on its own, and that is why we are making extensive preparations for a move to the delay phase.
But we will, Nigel, have to go to the delay phase. That seems almost certain now. This is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And the Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, said only this evening that the spread of coronavirus would happen, and I quote, really quite fast. And he also said that within 10 to 14 days, people with any signs of respiratory infection at all would be asked to self-isolate for a week. The Prime Minister was also responding to questions from a number of reporters in Downing Street about why the government isn't taking more forthright action at the moment.
And this is what we've been debating very much here on LBC. I was doing this yesterday, others have been doing it today. These flights are still coming in from Milan and elsewhere.
Indeed, and that is actually quite specifically that was raised in the press conference, and we've seen on social media, evidence of people arriving in from Italy and seeing no checks at the airports at places like Gatwick. Now, the Prime Minister was keen to point out that, it's important, what he said, to do the right thing at the right time. And the right time, he said, hasn't quite come for these things. Also, the Chief Scientific Advisor, Patrick Vallance, said that there is evidence that some of these airport checks and the like simply don't work very well.
It is really vital as we take these steps to protect ourselves and encourage everybody to protect everybody else, that we do it at the right time. It's not what you do, of course it's partly what you do, but it's when you do it. And what's happening, as Patrick said, what's happening in other countries doesn't necessarily mirror what's happening here in the UK, and that's why we're following the scientific advice in the way that we are. But on the Patrick, do you want to say something about that?
Yes, I'll say something about that. So it's important to actually look and see what really works and make those measures. There are lots of things that seem intuitive and you think, well, that should work, turn out to have very little, if any, effect. And one of those is actually airport screening. So temperature screening in airport doesn't really have much effect. It's worth noting that those countries that instituted it very early, some of their first cases came through that screening, weren't detected in the screening and then popped up. and some of those have stopped doing it now. So that isn't an effective measure. And other measures that people look at, so mass gatherings and so on, actually don't make much difference if you really look at it. And so those aren't the first things you'd go for. They're not the things that really help contain. And that's why what we're looking at is the things that really do make a difference, and making sure those are the things we concentrate on at the right time.
Should I just add one thing to that, which is, I think, important to remember that Italy, and I think all of us, our hearts go out to the situation in Italy. They were the first country in Europe to actually ban flights at that stage from China, and they also looked at airport screening. And as you can see, this is not cause and effect, but that has not been a reason to actually slow down the epidemic in that country.
Well, that's what they say. The fact you may not detect everybody seems to me you could at least be trying. There was some advice given out very late last night, which came from the Department of Health and Social Care, saying that if you'd been to Iran, the Hubei province, or the lockdown areas of northern Italy, you should stay indoors and avoid contact with other people for up to 14 days. But I wonder, Matthew Thompson, how many people landing today even from Milan even knew that?
Well, indeed. I mean, and this is where, you might expect much more active welcome committees or something at airports, even if you're not screening people, posters and people handing out leaflets to say, have you come back from Italy or have you come back from Iran?
Nothing is what I'm hearing.
And that doesn't appear to be happening. So I think possibly some of those criticisms are still valid. But the central message coming from government throughout the day is it's important to do the right thing at the right time. One of the examples, for example, Nigel, that they gave at that press conference was that it's no use to tell people who have respiratory illness now to self-isolate, because what would happen is most people would just have the sniffles and there would be fewer people with coronavirus. But the right time will come in 10 to 14 days when the ratio of people with coronavirus to people with ordinary respiratory illnesses will be significantly different. And so it's important to do the right thing at the right time. And that's a sentiment that was echoed by the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, as he answered an urgent question from the Labour Party in the House of Commons earlier.
We continue to work to contain the virus, but we're also taking action to delay its impact, to fund research, and to mitigate its consequences. Throughout, our approach is guided by the science. That is the bedrock on which we base all our decisions. Our plan sets out what we're prepared to do, and we'll make the right choices of which action to pursue at the right moment. The scientific advice is clear. Acting too early creates its own risks.
Really?
So we will do what is right to keep people safe. Guided by the science, we'll act at the right time, and we'll be clear and open about our actions and the reasons for them.
Well, that's pretty clear then, isn't it, really? The government position is acting too early creates its own risks.
Some of that may be economic risk, of course, Nigel,
of course.
As against public health risk, and
Of
I
course.
suppose it is a balancing act of measuring the one against the other. But there is an argument for an abundance of caution, isn't there?
Thank you very much indeed, Matthew Thompson, LBC senior reporter. Well, I think that for the Health Secretary to say that acting too early brings its own risks is in danger of being one of the most irresponsible, and perhaps in a couple of weeks' time it'll look one of the most stupid things that any minister has ever said to the House of Commons. Why do I say that? Because of what's happening in Milan right now. The death rate rising by 100 a day in northern Italy predominantly. And astonishingly, 41% of those people in Milan currently in intensive care beds are 64 years or under. So the idea that this just affects people in their 70s and 80s who are already ill clearly is not being borne out by the experience in Milan that is happening right now. And, when we talk about Northern Italy, we're talking about a very well-funded, very professional health service, rated the second best health service in the world after Japan, and they are struggling to cope with this. And I hope I'm wrong. But it seems to me that in a couple of weeks' time, that's the position we could be in some parts of the United Kingdom. And yet, 17 aeroplanes yesterday, 17 aeroplanes from Milan Malpensa came into UK airports yesterday without a single check, without a single piece of advice. They weren't even being told then to quarantine. They're sort of being told to do it now, but unless you give somebody an official piece of paper, I suspect they're unlikely to do it. Are you satisfied the government is doing enough? I'm not. I think we're busy playing catch-up here. Jacob is a new caller from Wandsworth. Jacob, good evening to you.
Hi, Nigel. I just wanted to thank you foremost for all the work you've done in regards to Brexit.
Thank you. But what about this issue, Jacob?
So just to give you a bit of context, I have just flown back from a central region of Italy today. Obviously, having spent a few days there, I've seen kind of the widespread response. It's obviously a big thing over there. It's affecting everything from people staying indoors and not touching each other. But coming back into Heathrow today, it's just kind of amazing to see that the only kind of information I get once I get back to the UK is a sign giving you a brief overview of what the virus is, and that's after you make out of arrivals. And it just feels like here we're not taking this seriously. So
Jacob, just to be clear, you landed today?
Yes.
And did anybody give you any piece of paper, any official advice of any kind at all?
So we've got a piece of paper on the Italian side.
On the Italian side, yeah.
Yeah, which was just printed out on an A4 telling us what it is and what we should do if we've been to a particular region in Italy. But once we're back in the UK, nothing. Obviously, it's quiet. You get out, there's a sign, that's it, off you go. And it just felt an utter contrast of what I got in Italy.
And the region you were in, was it one of the lockdown areas or not?
No, it was bordering the areas. It was in Tuscany.
Right, okay. And you flew from?
It was from Bologna.
Okay. But even so, Jacob, you would have expected rather more than just a signboard when you got back to a UK airport.
Yes, for sure. I mean, like I said, when I got to Italy, there were people screening people for their temperatures. There were notices everywhere. I was in a region that is not a red zone, so to say.
Sure.
But people are obviously taking this seriously, considering, like the kind of free movement we have in Europe. And in the UK, it just seems like it's nothing. We're just waiting for something to happen. And I think with the examples we've seen happen in Italy, it's kind of we should be reacting on what's already been happening, as opposed to just waiting around.
Absolutely. Jacob, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for that call. And I rather agree with Jacob. It's almost as if we're being told by Boris Johnson and Health Secretary Matthew Hancock that when it gets bad, we'll act, as opposed to let's act now and do our best. We may not succeed, but do our best to try and stop it getting bad. I don't think the government are doing anything like enough. If you think I'm being too harsh, you tell me why on 0345 6060 973. This is the Nigel Farage Show on LBC at 6:15. Time for the news headlines with Ollie Jones.
Boris Johnson says the government's preparing for the next phase of tackling the coronavirus. At least 319 people in the UK have now tested positive for the illness, with 5 deaths. England's chief medical officer says tighter measures are likely to be brought in soon, including anyone with flu-like symptoms self-isolating. Stock markets around the world are suffering their worst day since the 2008 financial crisis. A major oil dispute is hitting shares already suffering from the impact of the virus. LBC weather, windy with rain affecting many areas tonight. Very wet for Wales, with an amber warning in place for central parts, a low of 5.
LBC Travel, I'm J. Louise Knight, and the M25 is slow anti-clockwise from 7 at the M23 to Gosden at 6 after an earlier accident. It's slow clockwise towards 26 for Waltham Abbey because a car's broken down on the exit slip road. A car's broken down in the roadworks on the northbound M23 approaching the M25, and there's been an accident on the northbound M1 at 12 for Toddington, blocking one lane. An accident on the North Circular is causing westbound queues from Finchley High Road to the Golders Green Road traffic lights. Now onto the tube. There's still no Bakerloo line Paddington to Oxford Circus, with severe delays on the rest of the line. On the train, Southern can't run from Clapham Junction to Milton Keynes Central. That's causing delays on Avanti West Coast and London North Eastern, and South Western have delays of half an hour at Hounslow.
This is LBC.
Morning, robot.
What are your instructions?
Start with the invoices, then crack on with the expenses.
Why not use Xero? Your bills and receipts are easy to capture and get stored automatically.
If I'm using Xero for my books, I need you for...
Karaoke? Daisy?
No thanks.
Manage your accounts easily with Xero. Visit xero.com.
The coronavirus outbreak from every angle.
What we know, what we don't yet know.
For expert analysis and all the latest information, stay with LBC.
Final call for passengers on flight BU372 to Berlin.
The average time between a final call and boarding is 4 minutes and 53 seconds. An unofficial fact officially brought to you by Betfair Casino. Because when there's a chance...
Perfect.
There's always a chance. Make the most of any chance with 30 free spins. Betfair Casino. Play Play today.
Free spins apply to new Betfair customers who have not played casino or arcade. Available on selected games. T's and C's at betfair.com. 18 plus. BeGambleAware.org.
This is the sound of confidence being made in the British Army. Did you get that? Here, past the rain. Past the shouting. To that. Right there. The sound of a soldier unclipping from their first mountain abseil, now ready to overcome any obstacle. The sound of confidence that lasts a lifetime being made. Find where you belong. Search Army Jobs.
Here's the thing about block management. If you do it yourself, you're over here sorting out the insurance, and here keeping everything compliant.
Don't forget the grounds maintenance and the service charges.
And that's just what you need to do today. But because the ABC Estates block management team can look after every aspect of your property portfolio, from repairs to service charge collections, your time can, at last, be better spent elsewhere. Be as happy as Larry with block management from Aldermartin, Baines and Cuthbert. Talk to us today. Call 0800 888 6688 or visit abcestates.co.uk.
With over 30,000 charge point connectors in the UK, the electric car is now the car. Search Go Ultra Low to find out more. Compatibility and access may vary.
One day, they'll build a statue of this horse. It's destined to be great. History made every time he runs. Just not today. Oh well, you've got fail to finish, so you get a free bet back. History can wait. For the passion of the bet. Coral Racing.
18 plus online and mobile. Applies to first real money single win or each way bet of £1 plus. £10 maximum free bet. Applies to selected races. All terms and exclusions at coral.co.uk. When the fun stops, stop.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Now, I'm normally the sort of person, I'm sort of stuff and nonsense type. Let's not worry about it, it'll be fine. I've never looked at, dates on food labels or listened to government health warnings or perhaps, in many ways, in my own life, worried too much about any of this stuff. And I really, really haven't. But this situation really worries me, and that's because I'm looking at Italy, a parallel developed country, and I've got the latest figures released just 20 minutes ago from Italy, and these need some thinking about. Official cases 7,985. Now, of course, we know the fact is the real number will be a lot higher than that, and there'll be people at home or have not yet been tested. But here's the thing: they're the official number of cases. Hospitalised 4,316. That means 50% of those that have been diagnosed are in hospital, and 733 of those are in intensive care as we speak. And do you sort of now see why one of the best health systems in the world is actually literally struggling to cope? Number of deaths so far, 463, 724 thus far have recovered. So that is what we're dealing with. That is the prospect that may face us in a couple of weeks' time. I think government needs to get ahead of it, but one or two of you have got other thoughts on this. Evening, Nigel. My understanding from the earlier press conference, this is the one that Boris Johnson did with the Chief Scientific Officer and the Chief Medical Officer, is the fact they no longer want to stop the virus because it will just come back at a time when we are less able to deal with it. Hence no checks at airports, no bar on public gatherings, no school closures. They want to get it going and then they'll implement their policies. Jason, in Epsom, I don't know whether that is right or not, but Bill in Wales has a very similar line of thinking. I think the government wants to bring this on now rather than have it come next winter. Better for the NHS to sort this out in the spring and the summer. And there may be something in that, Bill, in the sense that if this thing does peak at a time when we get better weather and higher temperatures, that clearly would be a much more positive thing. But I just don't feel we're doing enough. I mean, look, when we flew those Brits back from Wuhan, do you remember that? The planes that came back from Wuhan with Brits and other Europeans. And then there was another plane load of people who'd been on that cruise ship out in Japan. And we flew them back into the UK, straight onto coaches, and they were up to the Wirral and elsewhere and put into quarantine centres and then released after 14, 15 days. That's what we did with people at the start of this, coming from areas where we felt there was contamination. Now, You come in vast numbers from northern Italy, which is going through a really serious medical crisis, and nothing like that has been happening at all. Late last night, the Department of Health and Social Care is recommending that people self-isolate, but we're not actually giving people a sort of formal piece of paper or say, look, you really need to do this for your safety and the safety of your friends and family and loved ones and those you work with. We're just not doing it, and I'm baffled as to how that can be. Let us go to Adrian, who's a new caller from Clacton. Adrian, good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thanks for taking my call. I have to agree with you. I think it is kind of strange that checks at airports are not being done, because obviously there's been meetings, and obviously that idea came up and someone had to explain why that was a bad idea.
Well, the argument, Adrian, they make, and the argument we got from officialdom yesterday, and we heard a bit of it today in that press conference from the experts, is that because it can take up to 14 days, that's the gestation period for this virus, although actually most, I'm told, are within 5 or 6 days. Because it can take that long, you may well be temperature checking people before the symptoms have really come through. But, hey, shouldn't we at least be trying, Adrian?
Yes, I agree. I remember travelling during the M1H1 swine flu outbreak, and I used to live in Japan.
Yes.
And they all took that very seriously, and they had infrared cameras at the gates.
Yes.
And if anyone showed any slightly elevated temperature, you were pulled over. And it was different then because they had a very quick swab test that could give a positive or negative result on the spot almost. We don't have that with corona yet. But I can't see what the problem would be for sort of blanket temperature checking everyone and perhaps quarantining flights from hot areas. Or
a temperature check and a quick test to see whether people have got the virus. I mean, that could all be done, couldn't it, at Heathrow and Gatwick?
It could be, but I'm guessing cost comes into that because the swabs aren't free.
Adrian,
I understand, but
Adrian,
I agree
what's the cost? What's the cost?
True.
What's the cost of a plane load of people if several of them have got the virus? What's the cost of them spreading it to their workplace?
Potential death. Yeah,
well, you've got economic cost. You've got economic cost and human cost, haven't you?
I'm not arguing for that, but I'm sure that is the sort of difficult decision the government has to make. But I agree, I think more could be done. However, I have to say I'm kind of, in a selfish way, glad they're not. I actually have relatives in Japan at the moment, so Japan isn't such a hotbed country. They've dealt with it quite well and kept the sort of infection rate down. But if things do go a bit pear-shaped and flights start getting cancelled, I would be a bit personally hurt if that was the case.
I think you may have to prepare yourself for that, Adrian, because I think my feeling is, even though infection rates are going down in China, but only after they took very, very radical quarantine measures, my feeling is it's going to get worse before it gets better. Adrian, thank you very much indeed. Interesting you see Adrian talking about a previous crisis and the way it was dealt with in Japan. It's pretty different at Heathrow, is it not? Lewis is a new caller to me from York. Lewis, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So, I'm being very critical of the government. I think we're playing catch-up all the time. What say you?
I'm disappointed with how the government have dealt with it, to be honest with you. Absolutely. So, the incubation day is roughly about 14 days, even though they're saying about 5 or 6. Now, these numbers that have been released daily are potentially 2 weeks behind. We may have, 324, I think, is it roughly now?
330 odd, yep, right now, yep.
So, potentially in 2 weeks, that's going to be 6, 7, 8,000, maybe, potentially. Look at Italy, how much that has progressed and how much that has shot up. I think we should definitely... I know the economy is starting to take a hit now with the stocks and share market and everything, and it will happen, but it will bounce back. Look at what happened in the 2008 recession.
The question is, Lewis, what's the priority here, isn't it? That's the question, and I mean...
Human health.
Yeah, the first priority of government is to protect the country and protect its citizens, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you think one of the reasons... Is it possible that one of the reasons why the planes have kept flying is because after the collapse of Flybe, the government were really worried that if they started to put travel bans on, the whole lot might go bust?
I think we're too soft.
Too soft? What should we do, Lewis?
Too soft.
Come on, hard man Lewis from York. What should we... I tell you who was tough. Lewis, have a little listen with me. Have a listen to Rory Stewart, who was on LBC this afternoon. This is what he thinks.
I would be, for example, shutting down all schools in London now.
Wow.
This is the biggest single event we've had of this kind for 100 years, since the Spanish flu after the First World War, and we should have no regrets about acting quickly.
So he reckons we should close all the schools in London. What do you think of that?
Why not? Kids
Why not?
pick everything up, don't they? Kids pick everything up. Look at Italy now, university and schools.
Yeah. So
China, look how many numbers they're spreading now. What was the day-to-day? 45 new cases in China? So they say.
Yeah, well, they're falling. Well, yeah, so they say, but some evidence that it's falling. Right, Lewis, you want tougher action? Thank you very much indeed. And United States authorities have just announced they're planning a flight tomorrow to repatriate Britons on the coronavirus-hit Grand Princess ship. That's the one that's been out there off the west coast, and it's it's a sort of Facebook things we've seen from Britons on it. It's been looking pretty miserable for them. They are going to be repatriated tomorrow. Now, I bet you they'll be repatriated and then quarantined, even though maybe none of them will show the symptoms of coronavirus, but they will be quarantined, and yet you can hop on a flight from Milano and there's been no suggestion of it whatsoever. Ruth says on Facebook, I work in the NHS and we have no staff nor resources. Well, that's one of the reasons, Ruth, why they're talking about re-recruiting a lot of people, who maybe have retired from the National Health Service, and of course, 111, the phone line, they're beefing up that with thousands and thousands more people. And incidentally, one thing I won't criticise are the people that have been working on that 111 number. All the feedback I've had from people who've gone through with concern is they've been handled utterly professionally and with a great degree of care. So there's one thing that is going as well as I think as it possibly could in this situation. Kane said, I think we should be given self-testing kits. What do you say, Nigel? Kane, I did speak to a doctor today, and I asked, are there means by which people can go privately and just pay and get a test? No. All of this is within the National Health Service, so there's no private kits, there's no self-test kits. You've got to go through the NHS, and I wonder whether that of itself, even though, again, they're doing the best they can, but as this starts to grow, it's going to start to become very, very difficult for them. There may be an argument here for the government to let this loose a little bit and maybe let the private sector take some of the strain. This is the Nigel Farage Show at 6:30. Time for the news headlines with Holly Jones.
5 people in the UK who tested positive for the coronavirus have now died as the government prepares to move to the next phase of planning. At least 319 people have been diagnosed here. We are currently in the contain phase, but the Prime Minister says extensive planning is taking place to move to the delay stage. That could see a ban on mass gatherings. England's Chief Medical Officer says anyone with the flu or a fever is likely to be asked to stay at home and self-isolate within the next 2 weeks. But officials say there are currently no plans to bring in temperature checking at airports, as it doesn't always prove effective. An oil price war, which is compounding the effect of the virus, has seen stock markets around the world suffer their worst day since the 2008 financial crisis. The FTSE 100 has closed the day down 7.7% to its lowest level in almost 4 years. Stay with LBC for all the latest. LBC weather, windy with rain affecting many tonight. Very wet for Wales with an amber warning in place later for central parts, a low of 5 degrees.
Budget 2020 on LBC.
In the wake of the coronavirus outbreak, the government is to set out its financial priorities with Budget 2020 for the first time under Boris Johnson. Listen to LBC as we find out if there'll be extra protection given to businesses by the Chancellor, and will there be any emergency cash pledged to the NHS.
There's a range of scenarios. The NHS will get whatever resources it needs to get us through this and to respond to the health crisis.
The Budget, live with me, Sheila Fogarty. This Wednesday from 12 on LBC.
Here's to the ones who make it look easy. The Lewis Hamiltons, the Rory McIlroys, the Virgil van Dijks. They make it look easy, and with Sky Q, we make watching them easy. Get all the sport you love, including the Masters, F1 and Premier League on Sky Sports, and UEFA Champions League and Premier League on BT Sports. Sky Q, all in one place. Easy. Content based on subscription. See sky.com for details.
It can be convincing when someone calls you pretending to be your bank. Especially when they say your money is at risk and you should transfer your funds into a safe account. Well, don't be fooled. At Lloyds Bank, we will never call and ask you to move your money into another account. We believe nothing is more important than our customers' trust. And together, we can keep your money safe. Lloyds Bank, by your side.
We got it at Selco. Selco, it's where the trade goes.
At Selco, we've screwed down our prices on everyday building products. We've permanently lowered prices on our best-selling lines across Unifix, Spax and Vortex screws. Like 5x100mm Unifix general purpose wood screws, now only £4.49 ex-VAT for a pack of 100. See selcobw.com for more details. Selco, serving the trade for 125 years.
We got it at Selco. Selco, it's where the trade goes.
VAT charged at 20%.
A credit limit of up to £1,500. What do you have to do to get it? Simple. Get online and check if you're eligible for an Ocean credit card in minutes without affecting your credit score. For your Ocean credit card, visit ocean.co.uk now and get all that from Ocean. Intelligent Lending Limited is a credit broker. Capital One, the exclusive lender. Representative 39.9% APR variable. Borrow and spend responsibly.
When travelling from central London to the heart of Edinburgh, what's best? A plane or an LNER train? Well, there's a massive queue at the airport, so 1-0 trains. Free Wi-Fi on board? 2-0. Oh, and travelling with us is on average £35 cheaper than flying. Hat trick. It looks like the LNER train is the winner. So, book direct and find out more at lner.co.uk/air savings. Savings based on cheapest available fares.
This is the sound of confidence being made in the British Army. Did you get that? Here, past the rain. Past the shouting. To that. Right there. The sound of a soldier unclipping from their first mountain abseil, now ready to overcome any obstacle. The sound of confidence that lasts a lifetime being made. Find where you belong. Search Army Jobs.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
No, in a situation like this, human lives matter more than economics, and maybe my criticism is that the government has been thinking a bit more about not going too early in case it upsets the economics of a situation, and I'm critical of that. I think it's time we really looked at Italy and thought, wow, we've got to do something. But money still matters, of course it does, and today stock markets around the world are suffering their worst day since the 2008 financial crisis. A major oil dispute sent the price of oil plummeting, shares, of course, in oil companies falling dramatically. And earlier on, I spoke to City veteran David Buick, markets commentator with Aki Exchange, and I said to him, as an old commodity broker and metal trader, I couldn't help but notice the gold price had shot up today.
It's the flight to quality, the usual one that we normally see. And the other thing that really worries me when people bail out of equities is the astonishing yields now that have fallen from the sky for most of the bonds in terms of government bonds. We've got sterling, or should I say UK gilts, 10 years yielding 0.16%. US treasuries for 10 years, 0.52. Germany, minus 0.85 to put money with them. And that normally tells me one thing, that we're heading towards recession unless somebody does something about it, if not a slump.
And the stock market today opened, was it about sort of 8 points lower, 8% points lower on the opening? Where is it now, Dave?
Well, it ended up, the FTSE down 468 points, that's 7.25% down at 5,994. Do you know, that's way below where it was in 2000. It's extraordinary, isn't it? The DAX was down 7.42%, and also in New York, when I last look, the Dow is down 6.64%. It's dropped 1,718 points. We did actually have a 15-minute delay when it opened up over 7% down, just to sort of pause for reflection. So we're seeing levels that we haven't seen for months and months and months. And as you well know, being as experienced as you are, there are two things that worry me over this. One is uncertainty. Markets are fine with bad news, they're fine with good news. They can't do uncertainty. When's this going to end? And this is what we don't know. And the other thing is, of course, ever since technology really ruled markets, algorithms and program trades apparently now in the United States constitute 80% of turnover.
Goodness me.
So if somebody pushes the button sell, it's got nothing to do with the quality of the asset you've got. It's just that my algorithms tells you it's sell. And this, of course, has exacerbated the problem. Is it over? I doubt it very much indeed. Why? Because we have very little that the central banks can do. They say that rates are now saying that markets are saying that 0 is likely to be the Fed rate by the end of the year. How much more can you put interest rates down? It's not going to help at all. You need fiscal stimulus. You need things that goes direct to the consumer. And this is what I hope Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, recognises. Not only has he got to give us hope for the future, but he's got to deal with this mess.
It's a big day. It's a big day and a big moment. And finally, David, just one quick thought. Dramatically, the oil price opened 30% lower. Now, that, of course, contributed to many of the leading shares taking huge losses, but not necessarily bad news for all of us, is it?
Well, I'm not very happy about it, Nigel. Let me tell you why. Yes, you're right. BP was down as a result of that 24% at the opening. It's now down, I think, about 18%. But the fact remains is that OPEC, which constitutes 40% of the oil production of the world, asked the world, saying, we've got a glut of oil, let's put a 1.5 million barrel stoppage on it. And the Russians said no. And so Saudi Arabia said, don't mess with me, because if you do. Now, Russia, this is where there's an economic war going on. Russia produces 12% of the world's oil. That's 11 million barrels a day. And even if President Putin's put out something saying we can handle $25 to $30 a barrel for the next 6 to 10 years, in your dream, Squire, for the simple reason the Russian economy just couldn't take it.
Well, that was David Buick explaining the real huge turbulence in the financial markets today, and I've no doubt that's not over by a long chalk. The Cheltenham Festival starts tomorrow. 4 days of hundreds of thousands descending on Cheltenham and surrounding areas. Madness, says Karen Jones. Tom has just flown in long haul into Gatwick, straight through customs, no info, nothing. Have we gone mad? Not checking people. The government should be arranging for free hand sanitizer to be given out at all stations and transport hubs, says regards Paul. Not a bad idea. Nigel, you are not a scientist. It's far more complicated than shut up shop for a few weeks and it will disappear. This is a long game, and the virus will be around for the whole year. It could be even worse in the autumn. Well, hopefully by then, a vaccine of some kind will have been created. I'm going to just say to whoever sent that to me, look, I know we've got a problem. I know it's going to get a lot worse. But what I'm saying is, why are we adding to it? Why are we allowing people in quite large numbers to come back from one of the most infected areas of the world? A lot of those people who got back in yesterday would have gone home by public transport, probably some of them on the very overcrowded London Underground, and would have been back in their offices in Canary Wharf or somewhere else today. Does that really make sense without checking people, without testing people? I would have thought it was madness. Let's go to Tom, who's a new caller from Bristol. Tom, good evening.
Nigel, thank you. Great talking to you. Long-time listener. I'm just really disappointed in you.
Very good.
I mean this because...
Are you disappointed that because I've got friends in Milan and I know the truth about what's going on, I want to try and stop it happening here?
Look, we are British. I think we need to get on with this. We need the stiff upper lip, as you would say.
Yep.
We need to soldier on as best as we can. And you would be saying, if we all went into quarantine, you'd be having something to say about that. And all I'm saying is, I think we just need to be very careful with the words and what we're doing and thinking moving forward. You're a very influential person. You've got a huge following, and I think it's terrifying more the whipping up of people.
All right. Let me ask you a question, Tom. Let me ask you a question, Tom. When that aeroplane comes back from America tomorrow with those people from that cruise liner who've been stranded off the Californian coast, do you think they should just go straight home?
I'm sure they won't.
Why? Why not? Why not?
Well,
if you can fly in from Milan, where there's a serious infection rate, and not even be given a leaflet, what's the difference between that and coming off a cruise ship?
Because there was an issue on that cruise ship. And
there's an issue in Milan.
Yes, but I think the difference is, there's an issue in London, isn't there? it's a big place, isn't it? It's a big place. I think, what we
There are 9,000.
Sensible here.
Tom, there are 9,000 confirmed cases in Italy, but everybody knows the figure is much, much higher than that. Very unlikely. If you've been through a main street in Milan in the last week, it is very unlikely that you've not been in close proximity to somebody who's now got the coronavirus.
I don't know if you can say that, Nigel. I just think.
Well, I'm just looking at the numbers. I
know, Nigel. Yeah, but you're a numbers man. That's your background, and I think you just need. Like I said, I'm just disappointed in your tone, and Boris. I'm sure he's got a plan. He always seems to have a plan.
Are you sure? Are you really sure, Tom? Come on, I mean, listen, I'm here to be persuaded. Come on, you got your chance, and you're now laughing.
You know better than I do. No, I think he's got the spirit. I think he has. I think he's doing all he can. I think he's in a rock and a hard place, and I think that I am probably maybe I'm in the camp that we'll unfortunately get coronavirus, and you'll all say I told you so. But I personally think we need to stay buoyant. We need to stay positive, and we need to carry this country on as we would through any other crisis, Nigel. And I think that you're in a position to assist with that. And I appreciate, and I like listening to you. And I appreciate some of the things you say. And sometimes it does make me gasp for breath. And other times it makes me go, actually, is he talking sense? But on this, I just think, we need to slow down. And I cannot believe the government, no matter what you think of Boris and everything else, that the government and their advisors would be that stupid to allow us to just carry
Tom,
down
I am keen to be as praiseworthy of Boris Johnson and his government as I possibly can be. The idea that Jeremy Corbyn could be sitting there right now fills me with total horror. And I have been, Tom, if you listen to the show regularly, you say you do, I've been very praiseworthy of the approach David Frost is taking, of the approach Johnson has taken up at Dispatch Box, and we've got these Brexit talks off to a fantastic start. So I will be as praiseworthy of Boris as I can be. Tom, and I'm going to say it one more time to you, does it actually make sense that 17 flights come into major UK airports from Malpensa, Milan yesterday, and not a single person is checked or given any advice at all? Does that really make sense to you?
I think it's a numbers game. I think it's purely a numbers game, and I think that is, again, you know better than me, and I think someone is looking at their algorithms, aren't they? And they're looking at the statistics, and they're working it out.
If it's a numbers game, Tom, I'm sorry, you will lose this argument, because it is very, very unlikely that some of those people who came in yesterday will not have this virus and won't even know they got it, and that's the problem. Tom, thank you for coming on. We'll agree to disagree on this one. This is the Nigel Farage Show. It is 6:45. And it's time for the news headlines with Holly Jones.
5 people in the UK have now died after testing positive for the coronavirus, with all patients already suffering from underlying health problems. Boris Johnson says extensive preparations being made to enter the next phase in its plan to battle COVID-19, which could see tighter measures on large gatherings. Anyone with flu and cold symptoms or a fever could soon have to stay at home in self-isolation to stop the spread of the virus. LBC weather: windy with rain affecting many tonight, very wet for Wales, with an amber warning in place for central parts, a low of 5 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm J-Louise Knight, and there's been an accident on the anti-clockwise M25. It's shutting one lane after junction 2 for the A2. It's still slow on the northbound M23 towards a car that's broken down before the M25, and an accident on the M1's causing northbound delays towards Toddington at junction 12. If you're heading south on the M11, there are delays to Harlow at 7 after a car broke down, and an accident heading out of town on the A13 is causing queues from the Canning Town flyover to Movers Lane. Onto the tube, severe delays now on the whole of the Bakerloo line, and on the train, Southern can't run from Clapham Junction to Milton Keynes Central. It's all due to a problem with the overhead wires. And South Western have delays of half an hour at Hounslow, as well as 20-minute delays from Waterloo to Vauxhall.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
At 8 on our Monday night panel, it's your chance to question our panel of health experts on the latest developments in the coronavirus crisis.
Ian Dale on LBC.
Does it matter to you how your money's invested? Think about it. You've got your own values, but do the people who invest your money share them? With a Wealthify stocks and shares ISA, you can put your money into an ethical plan. Just tell us how you want to invest. Are you cautious, adventurous, or somewhere in between? And start your Wealthify ethical ISA today. Easy. For more information, download the app or visit wealthify.com. With investing, capital is at risk and you could get back less than you put in.
Vodafone 5G will have the power to change your world. From driverless cars to virtual reality and real-time gaming. That's why we're rolling out 5G across the UK. Discover Vodafone 5G on the UK's best mobile data network. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
NPerf testing awarded Vodafone Best 2019 mobile internet performance based on 35,664 tests on the NPerf app in the UK. Coverage may vary. Visit vodafone.co.uk.
Keep coming. Yeah, bit more.
At Hey Car, you'll find the best used cars all in one place. Every car is quality checked and comes with a warranty. So finding your perfect used car is easy. You just need somewhere to park it.
Back. Whoa. Yeah, great. Stop.
To find your perfect used car, search Hey Car.
At Morrison's, we're cutting hundreds of prices that will be held low. Like a litre of Flash All-Purpose Cleaner that was £2, now with a new lower price of £1. Morrison's, we're cutting prices for you. Majority of stores subject to availability.
The moment you realise you've drilled through an electric cable. The moment you realise that doesn't just mean no telly on the wall, but no telly full stop. The moment you realise you've got British Gas Home Care. And not just your electrics, but your plumbing, heating and drains are all covered. So the moment you've got a problem, make it our problem. British Gas, here to solve. Search British Gas Home Care.
Here, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
When did the word free stop meaning free? Buy one, get one free. Wait 6 months and then it's free. How about something a little more clear? When you buy car or home insurance, you can choose a free gift with Confused.com rewards, like Green Flag Breakdown cover, a £20 Domino's or Halfords voucher, or a Now TV pass. Don't be confused. Be Confused.com. Available on single annual policies. Now TV 18+. Full T's and C's online.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC, The Nigel Farage Show.
Well, our previous caller, Tom, thought I was being over the top with this, and I get a nice little tweet in here. Tom has solved it. We fight coronavirus with bravado. Hurrah for Tom. I think there's a slight note of sarcasm there. But Jeff in Brentwood upbraids me and says, I'm a big fan, but stop behaving like all the media outlets affected by the liberal pathogen. Do what humans have done for hundreds of years. Just get on with it. Yeah, Jeff, ultimately, we're going to have to just get on with it. But the argument that I'm making is that it's irresponsible. You know, the argument I'm making is that it is crazy to allow plane loads of people to come in from a severely affected area without checking anybody, and up until yesterday giving them no advice of any kind at all. And yet, if you come off a cruise ship, you get put into quarantine. You know, we're not being very consistent about this, and if there is a problem, why add to it? That's really the argument that I'm making on. Keep calm and carrying on. This virus doesn't cut it with me, says Kay. Well, there we are. But it does with a lot of people. And I've got to say this. You know, I was out and about this morning and bumping into quite a lot of people, and they're all concerned. And the common thing that was said to me was, well, you know, our neighbour's 93 and I'm worried how she's going to be, or my dad's 80 this year, or, I mean, you know, all of us have got an elderly relative, or we know somebody of advanced years, and, you know, we've been told that this particular, and it's called a strain of flu, but from what I can see in Milan, it's pretty much worse when people get it than flu normally is, quite a lot worse actually, and you know, people are genuinely worried, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that the British are losing their reserve or cracking up. They're not, but there is genuine concern out there. There'll be even more concern when they realise that 40% of those in intensive care in Milan are aged 64 years or under. Antonio is a new caller to me from Isleworth. Hi, Antonio.
Hi, Nigel. Thank you for having me on the show. So I'm an Italian citizen who's been living in London for the last 4 years. And I've been living, the experience from the two perspectives. From the Italian perspective, because I've got family there who is crippled with the virus. Mm-hmm. They have to shut the shop and, the economy is completely crippled. And I'm living the experience as as an Italian resident in a foreign country. And, English people who I've talked to, they laugh about it. They don't take it seriously. They are very unconscious of the consequences which might occur very, very soon. Because if I look at the figure, Matteo Salvini just published these figures now. Yep. So we have 9,172 cases in Italy, which has been nearly 4 weeks.
And nearly half of them in hospital.
This is horrible. This means that basically in the next 2 months we might have tripled this amount. And the same goes for the UK.
Antonio, do you have friends or family in Italy that have been confirmed as having the virus?
Yes. And a friend of mine who lives in Milan, and he went there for a surgery operation. He came back and he decided to put himself in quarantine. He called the hospital and he said, "I have spinal flus and I think I have coronavirus." So so the hospital. The nurses went there with wearing all the protective clothes and masks to probe this friend of mine, and he actually turns out to have the coronavirus. But people, not everyone follows guidelines. If you see what happens with people fleeing Milan without even following any rules, the government has specifically said not to leave Lombardy.
Yeah, and as soon as they heard that, a lot of people did flee. Now I know that, Antonio. But
you're scaring me is that people who are not taking it seriously here might actually have contracted the virus already by coming back from Italy.
Well, this is my concern. This is my concern.
They will not listen.
So basically, we're being too complacent here, yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah. Nigel, I do support what you say. I always been a huge fan of your views, and I'm a huge fan of Matteo Salvini as well. So I always think that probably sometimes you have to be harsh with the public in order to get the message across.
Well, we've certainly got to get the message across. Antonio, thank you for that. And breaking news. A worker at Aintree University Hospital in Liverpool tests positive for coronavirus after recently returning from a holiday in Italy. So, he's been in hospital, he's come back from Italy, he's gone back to work in a hospital in Liverpool, and now, we don't know how many days afterwards, has been tested positive for coronavirus. Those of you who don't agree with me, are you getting the point now? Are you getting the point that people are coming back from Italy infected with this, not being checked, not being tested, not being quarantined in any way at all? They're going out and about via public transport and going back to work, and we're adding to a problem that we already have. I'm not trying to instill mass panic or anything like it. I'm just saying that I think in this regard the government is being negligent. That's how I feel. Let's go to Bill, who's a new caller from Finchley. Bill, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. I totally agree with you. I mean, I can't understand why we're in Ireland and we got the Channel over there. We got natural defences, and it's just idiotic that they're just letting people just travel how they want back to this country. But I'll just point out one thing in my own case.
Yes.
I'm 68. My mum is 94.
Yep.
I'm a full-time carer for her.
Yep.
So in whichever case, whether she got it or I got it, how could I self-isolate? Because we both live together.
Yeah, it's very difficult, Bill, and it's very difficult, and
I don't know, really, to be honest with you. But it's all right saying, "Oh, we'll do this and do that," but even then, people who's gone in self-isolation, when they've done it, they can come back out and they can still catch it.
Bill, there are no easy answers to all this. Thank you. I'm just going to take one last quick caller, Catherine, a new caller who's calling from Padua in Italy. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Nigel. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, I was going to say think, well, I live in the lockdown area at the moment, and we're just being careful. My husband and I both work from home. But it's happened so fast, it's spread so fast. I think the UK ought to take stronger measures. They're holding back because they don't want to create panic. But quite honestly, some of the hospitals here are actually in crisis, and they're saying they're desperate.
This is what I'm hearing from Milan, absolutely. Yeah.
They're having to choose between who's worth treating and who isn't. And it's not just the elderly who are getting the virus. I mean, some younger people are affected, and if they need intensive care, there may not be enough staff or respirators. Because if your lungs stop working, you need to be intubated.
Yeah, and the problem is, Catherine, the sheer number of respiratory machines. Catherine, I'm out of time. I thank you for your call, and I would suggest to all of you, wise words from Catherine. People who think this is just flu and it's going to go away are not right. This is really, really bad. It's really nasty. And Matt Hancock can tell you that there are risks in acting too early. I'm going to tell you there are even bigger risks in not acting early. And the fact we've allowed all these people in from Italy without being tested is mad. And more breaking news, all schools in the Madrid region will shut over coronavirus concerns, according to a Spanish radio station. I'll be back tomorrow at 6. At 10 tonight, it's Tom Swarbrick. But right now, it's Ian Dale.
Nigel, thank you. Well, we're going to continue the conversation throughout the programme. At 9, Israel says anyone entering the country will have to self-quarantine for 14 days. The Italian government has shut off 16 million people in the north of the country. France is banning public meetings of more than 1,000 people, but still allowing demonstrations. How very French. Rory Stewart says the government should be shutting schools despite expert advice to the contrary. Given very few of us are experts here, who should we be listening to? Because our government is clearly listening to the scientific and medical experts who are telling